container ship known as the Ever Given. The last of the cargo is loaded onto the ship, and the captain of the ship, Krishnan Canthavel, is there with his crew of 20. Hello! At this point, Canthavel probably said something like, "All right, the boat's tummy is all full of cargo. We're almost ready to get going." So Evergreen, the operating company of the ship, would have called ahead and booked passage for the ship. Yes, one adult ship ticket, please. Large. How many containers? Hold on.
All right, so look, this redistricting thing, it's not a surprise the Republicans are doing this. I would say the bigger surprise is...
Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report powered by NCA.com. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Caught in the act, a CE.
They were coming for me, bro.
Hey, Willa, there's somebody who was spamming the comments,
under that video.
Oh,
what
Facebook.
Did you say? What did you say?
Bro, what happened,
I
bro?
said colored people chow each other.
That's insane. Then you say it again.
Yo.
But that guy,
He says it.
But I think you said it as a joke, bro.
That's what I'm saying, bro. I was saying it as a joke.
We say a lot of things about Limpopo guys.
You can tell that I'm joking.
Juanita, they know, even the guys from Limpopo, they know we joke about him. Or you think we are from KZN, and we say that, but they don't take offense to it. So I don't get that guy who was commenting, bro.
No, that guy has a condition, bruh. Facebook was worse. And bruh, it was the first time I saw a reel that had colors only in the comments. I could tell if I would walk in a room. Yes, the pastel, yeah.
I think you guys say such out-of-pocket things.
They really, but we are entertainers.
All the time, so why was that
Okay,
one
but
so...
like, put it as a disclaimer, I'm joking.
I need to share a joke.
Juanita,
I don't think it was that deep.
Juanita,
If it's not true, they shouldn't have gotten in touch like that.
Juanita, it's
If
like
it was
that thing I
true.
said about porridge just now. It's obviously a
And then you won't
joke.
take it.
I don't have to apologize.
I feel
But
like
you
they
said,
banned
no, not Pori. Then you could have said, nah.
Not
like,
colored.
Yeah, something like that.
Guys, I'm sorry.
You guys are too sensitive, man.
I'm sorry, guys.
I find it too sensitive.
yeah,
Sensitive generation.
They know we love colored
I'm scared of
people.
colors. After watching Kings of Joburg,
Yeah.
Chief.
Hey, Salat, he'll come for you.
But they're nice people. They love very hard also. Like maybe dating like colored girls.
Everything they do.
It's
So
just
discouraged.
but shame. Like people, the world wouldn't. We love colored
Me,
people.
when I
It's
date
not
colored,
like
Chief,
personal.
I first deal with the coloredness first.
I know, Chief.
Take it outside.
I know.
She must stay black now.
Why?
Hey, colors are too much.
Yeah.
They think everything is war. That's the problem. You know, everything is hardcore,
Teaching them how
even
to
in
be
sports.
soft.
So I am at Brooklyn Police Station in Hatfield, Pretoria, in Tshwane, and I am sure you know exactly what it is that I am here to do. And in my hands is the criminal complaints, because we are going to be laying charges against the two individuals from the Open Chats podcast. And I am acting on behalf of the Patriotic Alliance because I have been given express authority by my party president, the Honorable Minister Gayton McKenzie. It's windy outside. Guess that's what the winds of change feel like.
I just want to confirm.
There we go. And now we've got this one to fill in also. It's the way my form says BR and not C. We must sort out that one on another day. We are done.
Yeah.
We are finished. Okay. There you have it. The charges have been laid, and as we say in the Patriotic Alliance, the hunt us lost.
To me, you of Open Podcast, we will rock up there while you're busy recording, and we want to hear the same energy about us when we walk in that room. We will find you. We'll find where you record, and we want to see the same energy of insulting us like that. I'm the leader of the Patriotic Alliance, and I'm saying to you, you don't know the PA. They will rock up in numbers to the SABC. To those kids,
A lot of people die in a lot of really weird ways in this story.
The quantum computer, they're calling it, can compute many times faster than the current breed of supercomputers. A successful quantum computer could crack any code on the planet Earth.
That's what's exciting about quantum computing, and that's what we're doing.
Quantum computing is a fundamentally...
All right, guys, let's talk about Hunter Biden. So, Andrew Callahan
did another interview with Hunter Biden. Now, by the way, shameless plug, everybody subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack, because me and Crystal had on Andrew Callahan, and we talked about the first Hunter Biden interview, and that was a really fun conversation. So sign up on Substack for that if you haven't yet. Really good.
Look around. You vote, you post, you protest. But behind the noise, who really holds power? And more importantly, who is protected from consequence? There's something we've forgotten, something that kept one of history's greatest minds awake at night. Aristotle feared oligarchy more than tyranny, because tyrants are obvious. They announce themselves, they demand worship, they rule through terror. But oligarchs? They hide behind institutions, laws, brands, and charities. They smile while they strangle, and we protect them. The true friend of the people should see that the people do not become too poor, Aristotle wrote in his Politics. His fear wasn't wealth itself, it was inequality without virtue. Power concentrated in hands that never get dirty, decisions made by those who never face consequences. What did he see that we've chosen to forget? What warning did he leave us, buried beneath centuries of comfortable lies about democracy and freedom? Let's go back, to the warning we forgot, to the mirror we're afraid to look into. Most people think government is simple. Democracy versus dictatorship, freedom versus tyranny. But Aristotle saw something far more sophisticated and far more terrifying. He saw government as a living organism that rots from within, following predictable patterns of decay. His map wasn't linear. It was cyclical. Monarchy decays into tyranny when kings stop serving their people. Aristocracy corrupts into oligarchy when merit gives way to greed. Constitutional government collapses into mob rule when emotion replaces reason. Every form of government has a deviant form, he observed, when the rulers rule for themselves rather than for the common good. But here's where it gets disturbing. Aristotle believed oligarchy was the most dangerous corruption of all. Not because oligarchs are crueler than tyrants, but because they're invisible. They don't seize power, they purchase it. They don't destroy institutions, they hollow them out and wear them like masks. They don't oppress people, they convince people to oppress themselves. Now, I'm not saying our democratic institutions have accomplished nothing. We've won real rights through centuries of struggle. Civil rights, labor protections, environmental standards. These victories matter. But here's what's chilling. Many of these hard-won protections are being systematically eroded by the very wealth concentration Aristotle warned about. Let me give you a concrete example. Boeing rushed the 737 MAX into production, prioritizing profit over safety. The result? 2 fatal crashes, 346 people dead. And yet, the FAA had outsourced key safety certification to Boeing's own engineers. That's not oversight, that's collusion. Executives faced no prison time. The planes were eventually reapproved. That's not justice. That's oligarchy in action. When a corporation becomes so powerful, it doesn't just bend the rules. It writes them. It regulates itself, silences accountability, and walks away richer while the public pays the price. Or consider pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharma. They knew opioids were addictive, hid the evidence, and fueled an epidemic that killed over 400,000 Americans. The Sackler family extracted billions in profits. When finally caught, they paid fines that were a fraction of their wealth and faced no jail time. Meanwhile, people struggling with addiction face imprisonment and social stigma. The system protects those who create harm while punishing those who suffer from it. Oligarchy isn't just rule by the rich. It's rule by those who use wealth to systematically exclude others from power while maintaining the illusion of participation. The genius of modern oligarchy is that it feels voluntary. We think we're choosing our leaders, our jobs, our futures. but the options were predetermined by those with the resources to shape the menu. It is more proper that law should govern than any one of the citizens, Aristotle insisted. Law should be blind, impartial, universal. But what happens when the law becomes something only the wealthy can afford to understand, to navigate, to escape? You get a system where justice isn't blind, it's for sale. Now here's where it gets truly unsettling, where human psychology becomes our greatest weakness. Why do we protect the very people who exploit us? Why do we defend a system that treats us as disposable? Why do we rage against those below us while worshipping those above us? Science has actually studied this. Psychologists John Jost and Mazarin Banaji discovered something disturbing in their research on system justification theory. They found that people have a psychological need to defend the status quo, even when it hurts them. In one experiment, they showed that people living in poverty were more likely to justify wealth inequality than middle-class people. The very people being crushed by the system defended it most strongly. Why? Because admitting the system is rigged means admitting you're trapped, and that's too painful to accept. Our brain's desperate need to believe that the world is fundamentally fair and orderly means that when faced with obvious injustice, we don't revolt, we rationalize. We create stories that make the unbearable bearable. Maybe they worked harder. Maybe they're just smarter. Maybe I'll be rich too someday. It's just how the world works. We trade our righteous anger for a fantasy of eventual inclusion. We accept crumbs today for the promise of cake tomorrow, a cake that will never come. And oligarchs understand this psychology perfectly. They don't just extract our wealth, they capture our imagination. They sell us the American dream while systematically destroying the conditions that make it possible. The most brilliant part? They've convinced us that questioning the system makes us losers, complainers, socialists, that accepting exploitation is somehow mature, realistic, patriotic. But there's something even more insidious at work. The oligarchs have mastered the ancient art of division. Tyrants preserve themselves by sowing discord among the people, Aristotle observed. But oligarchs are more sophisticated than tyrants. They don't need obvious oppression, they just need strategic division. Here's how this works in practice. Amazon spent $4.3 million on anti-union consultants to stop workers from organizing in Alabama. But what did the news focus on? Whether the workers were being manipulated by outside agitators. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos made $13 billion during the pandemic, while his workers couldn't afford to take sick days. But somehow the conversation became about whether workers deserved $15 an hour, not why the richest man on earth was fighting so hard to keep his employees poor. If the poor are fighting each other over race, religion, or immigration status, they'll never unite against economic exploitation. If the middle class fears the poor more than they fear the rich, they'll side with the oligarchs for protection. If workers compete against each other instead of organizing together, wages stay low and profits stay high. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's strategy as old as civilization. Look at our media landscape. Look at our political discourse. How much time do we spend fighting each other over cultural issues while economic inequality reaches historical extremes? How often are we debating who deserves basic dignity while billionaires pay lower tax rates than teachers? Here's something that would have terrified Aristotle: the systematic destruction of the middle class. The best political community is formed by citizens of the middle class, he wrote. Why? Because the middle class has skin in the game. They're not desperate enough to be bought, not wealthy enough to be corrupted, and numerous enough to check both extremes. A stable society needs people who have enough to survive without desperation, enough to grow without greed, enough to participate in civic life without being owned by anyone. The middle class serves as democracy's immune system, preventing both the chaos of desperate poverty and the corruption of unchecked wealth. But look at the data. Research from the Economic Policy Institute shows that since 1979, productivity has increased 70%, while wages for typical workers have grown only 12%. Studies reveal the top 1% now controls 32% of all wealth, while the bottom 50% owns just 2%. College costs have increased 1,200% since 1980. Medical bills contribute to hundreds of thousands of personal bankruptcies annually, according to various studies. This isn't natural economic evolution, it's engineered extraction. What happens when the middle class collapses into debt and anxiety? When the poor become desperate and angry? When the rich become untouchable and arrogant? You don't get revolution. Revolution requires hope, organization, and shared vision. Instead, you get something far more insidious: learned helplessness masquerading as democracy. Psychologist Martin Seligman's famous experiments with dogs showed how learned helplessness works. Dogs that couldn't escape electric shocks eventually stopped trying to escape, even when escape became possible. They just lay there and took it. Sound familiar? How many people do you know who complain about their jobs, their debt, their healthcare costs, but have stopped believing anything can actually change? Modern oligarchy has perfected this illusion. It doesn't need to ban free speech, it just buys the platforms. It doesn't need to rig elections, it just funds all viable candidates. It doesn't need to control information, it just floods the zone with noise. The most effective prison is the one where the inmates don't realize they're locked up. And we've built that prison so beautifully that we defend it against anyone who suggests the door might be unlocked. Aristotle believed the greatest threat to any society wasn't external invasion. It was internal virtue collapse. When citizens stop caring about the common good, when leaders pursue private gain over public service, when wealth becomes the only measure of worth, that's when civilizations die from within. Look at our culture with honest eyes. What do we celebrate? What do we reward? What do we teach our children to aspire to? We worship wealth regardless of how it's obtained. We celebrate fame regardless of what it's built on. We admire power regardless of how it's used. This is exactly what Aristotle feared. A culture where money becomes the measure of merit, where success justifies any method, where winning matters more than how you play the game. We've replaced citizenship with consumerism, community with competition, and service with extraction. And today, the loss of virtue is not just cultural, it's systemic. Social media doesn't just reflect this decay, it accelerates it. Platforms reward outrage over honesty, spectacle over substance, and popularity over principle. They train us to perform instead of think, to react instead of reflect. In a world where the algorithm decides what matters, virtue has no market value. And without virtue, democracy becomes a brand, curated, commodified, and sold back to us as engagement. When virtue dies, democracy dies with it. What remains is just the machinery of consent manufacturing the appearance of choice. We get to choose between pre-selected options, debate pre-framed questions, and participate in predetermined outcomes. Aristotle's warning was prophetic. Once oligarchs establish themselves, they will never voluntarily relinquish power. They must be contained by structure, not trust. Constrained by education, not obedience. Checked by organized citizens, not hopeful individuals. Aristotle wasn't advocating for socialism or communist revolution. He wasn't anti-wealth or anti-achievement. He was advocating for balance, what he called polity, constitutional government rooted in civic virtue and broad participation. A system where merit mattered more than money, where laws served the common interest, not special interests, and where power was distributed widely enough to prevent corruption. So what would modern polity look like? It starts with structural changes that make oligarchy impossible to sustain. First, we need to break the stranglehold of money on politics. That means constitutional amendments to overturn Citizens United, public financing of campaigns, and complete transparency in political donations. When dark money can pour unlimited resources into elections, democracy becomes an auction to the highest bidder, not a system of collective self-rule. Second, we need progressive wealth taxation, not to punish success, but to prevent the kind of extreme wealth concentration that turns democracy into plutocracy. When individuals can accumulate resources rivaling entire nations, they don't just influence politics, they own it. Wealth taxes ensure economic success doesn't translate into political domination. Third, we need universal civic education. Democracy requires informed participation. Citizens must understand how power actually works, how to organize, how to challenge authority, and how to hold leaders accountable. Media literacy, political theory, and practical organizing skills should be core curriculum, not extracurricular. These measures embody Aristotle's concept of polity, rebalancing power through structure, participation, and virtue-focused institutions. But structure alone isn't enough. We also need cultural transformation, a renewal of civic virtue. That means understanding that individual success means little in a collapsing society. It means highlighting community builders in our media instead of just billionaires and influencers. It means teaching democratic values alongside STEM subjects. It means supporting local journalism that covers city council meetings and school boards, not just celebrity scandals. We need to celebrate teachers, nurses, and public servants the way we currently celebrate billionaires. We need to measure progress by how the least among us are doing, not by how high the stock market climbs. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition or entrepreneurship. It means recognizing that true success is shared and that extreme inequality is not just morally corrosive, it's politically unsustainable. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Aristotle's analysis is his understanding that this cycle is natural. Societies rise, peak, corrupt, and fall. Hard times create strong people. Strong people create good times create weak people create hard times. We're experiencing what we might call civilizational amnesia. We've forgotten the lessons that previous generations learned through blood and sacrifice. We've forgotten that freedom requires vigilance, that democracy requires participation, that justice requires effort. We've forgotten that power never gives up power voluntarily, that wealth never redistributes itself, that systems designed to benefit the few will never spontaneously serve the many. Every generation thinks they've transcended history, that they're too sophisticated to fall for the old tricks, that technology has somehow changed human nature. But Aristotle understood something we've forgotten. Human nature doesn't change. Only the tools of control become more sophisticated. The oligarchs of today use algorithms instead of armies, influence instead of intimidation, data instead of dungeons. But the fundamental dynamic remains the same. A small group accumulating power at the expense of everyone else, then using that power to ensure their position becomes permanent. But here's what gives me hope. Awareness can slow the cycle. Education can delay corruption. Structure can check power. Citizens can choose virtue over comfort. Long-term thinking over short-term gain. Common good over private benefit. So here we are, 2,400 years after Aristotle's warning, staring into the same mirror he held up to his world. And what do we see? We see a handful of individuals with more wealth than entire nations. We see corporations that write the laws that govern them. We see basic necessities transformed into luxury commodities. We see democracy reduced to choosing between pre-selected options every few years, while real power operates in boardrooms and country clubs. But we also see something Aristotle would recognize, the possibility of awakening. You're still here. You're still listening. You're still thinking. That means something in you refuses to accept that this is just how things have to be. The path forward isn't about tearing everything down. It's about building something better. It starts with individual awareness, but it requires collective action. It means supporting organizations, fighting for campaign finance reform, antitrust enforcement, and worker rights. It means engaging in local politics where your voice still matters. It means educating yourself on these issues and educating others. Most importantly, it means refusing to accept that oligarchy is natural or inevitable. It means remembering that every right we have was won by people who refused to accept the status quo. It means understanding that democracy isn't a spectator sport, it's a participation requirement. Aristotle would recognize our world immediately, but he wouldn't call it democracy. He'd call it exactly what it is: oligarchy with democratic characteristics, rule by the few, disguised as rule by the many. The question that should haunt you is this: now that you see it, what are you going to do about it? Because here's what Aristotle understood that we've forgotten. Freedom isn't a gift, it's a practice. Democracy isn't a system, it's a commitment. Justice isn't a law, it's a choice we make every day. And if this made something click for you, if it shook something loose, then chances are someone else in your life needs to hear it too. Maybe it's a friend who's struggling to make sense of the world, someone who feels powerless, frustrated, or quietly angry. Don't let them feel alone in that. Share this with them. Not because it has all the answers, but because sometimes the first step toward change is knowing you're not crazy for seeing what you see. The mirror is in your hands now. What do you see when you look around with these new eyes? And more importantly, what are you willing to do about what you see?
Easy.
Picture this. In 2018, teenagers across America started filming themselves biting into laundry detergent pods, literally poisoning themselves for internet fame. Meanwhile, millions of people became convinced the Earth was flat, despite centuries of scientific proof. And right now, as we speak, there's probably some conspiracy theory spreading faster than wildfire across social media. Here's what's fascinating and terrifying. These weren't isolated incidents of individual stupidity. They were mass movements, collective madness that swept through entire populations like a virus. Why does this happen? Why do the most ridiculous, shallow, and often dangerous ideas spread like wildfire while profound truths struggle to find an audience? Friedrich Nietzsche had a brutal answer to this question over a century ago, and it's more relevant today than ever. He wrote, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule." Think about that for a moment. The very act of joining a group makes us more susceptible to madness, not less. The herd doesn't make us wiser. It makes us more prone to collective delusions. But why? What is it about human nature that makes us abandon our individual judgment the moment we join a crowd? The answer lies in what Nietzsche called the most dangerous force in human society: herd morality. Nietzsche made a shocking claim that most people still find uncomfortable. Morality itself is nothing more than a herd instinct. It didn't evolve to help us find truth or make us better people. It evolved to keep us compliant, predictable, and equal. Morality is the herd instinct in the individual, he wrote. In other words, what we call our moral compass is actually just our internal GPS designed to keep us within the safe boundaries of the group. This explains something crucial about viral ideas. They don't succeed because they're true or profound. They succeed because they make us feel like we belong. They give us the warm, fuzzy feeling of being part of something bigger than ourselves. Consider how this plays out in our digital age. The ideas that go viral aren't the ones that challenge us to think deeper or question our assumptions. They're the ones that make us feel smart without having to do any real intellectual work. They're the intellectual equivalent of fast food, instantly satisfying but nutritionally empty. When someone shares a meme that destroys the opposing political party with a single image, they're not engaging in serious political discourse. They're performing membership in their tribe. They're saying, "Look, I'm one of you. I believe what you believe. I hate what you hate." The content doesn't matter. The tribal signal does. This is why conspiracy theories spread so effectively. They offer their believers a sense of special knowledge, of being part of an enlightened minority that sees through the lies everyone else accepts. But paradoxically, they achieve this by creating their own herd, a herd of supposed non-conformists who all think exactly alike. But there's something even deeper at work here. Something that Nietzsche understood about human nature that most of us would rather not face. We're absolutely terrified of standing alone. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of experiments that revealed just how far this terror extends. He showed people a simple line matching task, which of 3 lines matched the length of a target line. The answer was obvious. A child could get it right. But here's the twist. Asch placed real subjects in rooms with actors who were instructed to give obviously wrong answers. When their turn came, about 75% of real subjects gave the wrong answer at least once. They literally denied the evidence of their own eyes to conform to the group. Nietzsche saw this psychological weakness as the fundamental barrier to human greatness. He wrote, "He who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying." Most people never even attempt to stand alone. They never learn to trust their own judgment over the groups. They never develop the psychological muscles needed to think independently. It's simply too scary. And why is it scary? Because throughout human history, being expelled from the group meant death. Our ancestors, who were too independent, too questioning, too different, they didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. We're descended from people who were really, really good at conforming. This ancient programming still runs deep in our modern brains. When we see everyone else believing something, sharing something, laughing at something, our primitive brain screams, "Join in or be left behind." The result? We don't just tolerate dumb ideas, we actively seek them out. They feel safe, they feel familiar, they feel like home. But Nietzsche identified an even darker aspect of herd psychology, the positive pleasure we get from attacking anyone who dares to think differently. He called this ressentiment, a deep, poisonous resentment that the average person feels toward anyone who rises above the crowd. It's not just indifference to excellence, it's active hostility toward it. Think about how this plays out in our current culture. When someone becomes successful, innovative, or simply different, what's the first instinct? To find ways to tear them down, to mock them, to find the character flaw, the hypocrisy, the moment of weakness that proves they're just like everyone else. Social media has weaponized this instinct. The comment sections of any platform are filled with people who seem to take genuine joy in destroying anyone who dares to stand out. The more someone achieves, the more vicious the attacks become. This is why dumb ideas often go viral, specifically because they mock intelligence, expertise, or independent thought. They don't just unite people around a shared belief, they unite people around a shared enemy. The elites, the experts, the know-it-alls, who think they're better than everyone else. There's a perverse satisfaction in believing that all the smart people are actually stupid, that all the experts are actually wrong, that your common sense is superior to their fancy education. It's the ultimate revenge of the herd against anyone who dares to graze outside the fence. Now, let's dig into the psychological machinery that makes dumb ideas so irresistible. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman discovered something crucial about how our brains work. We're wired to favor ideas that feel easy to process. He called this cognitive ease, the feeling we get when information flows smoothly through our minds without friction. Ideas that are simple, familiar, and repeatedly encountered literally feel more true than complex, novel, or challenging ones. This is why clickbait works so well. Headlines like, "You won't believe what this celebrity did," or "This one weird trick doctors hate," bypass our analytical thinking entirely. They feel easy to process, so our brains interpret them as credible. But there's a second psychological principle at work here that makes the effect even more powerful. Psychologist Robert Cialdini identified what he called social proof, our tendency to look around and copy what others are doing, especially when we're uncertain. When we see thousands of people sharing, liking, or commenting on an idea, our brain performs a simple calculation. If everyone believes it, it must be true. We don't consciously think this, but our unconscious mind treats popularity as a proxy for truth. Put these two principles together, cognitive ease plus social proof, and you get the perfect recipe for viral nonsense. An idea that feels easy to understand and that lots of other people seem to accept will spread through a population like a perfectly designed virus. Your brain doesn't ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "Does this feel right? And do other people think so too?" If the answer is yes, you're already infected. This explains everything from internet memes to political movements to financial bubbles. The ideas that spread fastest aren't the ones that correspond to reality. They're the ones that correspond to our psychological biases. Here's where things get really interesting. Researchers have discovered that different types of content spread at dramatically different speeds through social networks. And there's a clear pattern. Content that triggers strong emotions spreads much faster than content that simply informs. Anger spreads faster than facts. Humor spreads faster than analysis. Fear spreads faster than reassurance. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. This isn't an accident or a flaw in how social media works. It's a feature of how human psychology works. We're social creatures, and sharing emotions is one of the primary ways we bond with each other. When we laugh at the same joke or get angry about the same injustice, we're creating and strengthening social connections. But here's the crucial part. Social media algorithms have learned to exploit these exact psychological vulnerabilities. They're designed to surface content that triggers strong emotional responses because that's what keeps us scrolling, clicking, and sharing. The algorithm doesn't care if the content is true. It cares if it's engaging. This creates a systematic bias toward emotional manipulation over factual accuracy. The problem is that truth often isn't emotional. Reality is often boring, complex, and uncertain. It doesn't give us the emotional high that comes from shared outrage or collective laughter. So what spreads isn't what's true. It's what feels significant. And nothing feels more significant than something that makes us feel strongly and that we can share with others to create a sense of unity. Nietzsche understood this about human nature. He wrote, "There are no facts, only interpretations." He wasn't being a postmodern relativist. He was observing that humans don't really respond to raw information. We respond to stories, emotions, and meanings. The herd amplifies feelings, not facts, because sharing feelings deepens belonging in a way that sharing information never can. When we collectively mock the same target or rage against the same enemy, we're not just exchanging information, we're performing a ritual of tribal bonding.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next, I set a priority and a due date to keep things on track. I create custom statuses to organize my progress exactly how I want it. I like to add the action items field so AI can show me the next steps. I add my teammates as watchers so they're in the loop. ClickUp makes work easy, from personal projects to running a multi-billion-dollar company. Click the link below to create your workspace for free.
But here's where Nietzsche's insights become genuinely frightening. He wasn't just describing an interesting quirk of human psychology, he was warning about the civilizational consequences of herd thinking. When societies become dominated by herd values, when conformity becomes the highest virtue and independent thought becomes the greatest sin, they inevitably sink into what he called mediocrity. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Look around at our current moment. How many of our institutions actively reward independent thinking versus conformity to group opinion? How many of our schools teach students to question popular ideas versus to adopt the correct views? How many of our media outlets encourage genuine debate versus tribal cheerleading? The answer is troubling, and it's getting worse. When dumb ideas go viral, they don't just entertain us, they shape policy, influence elections, and determine the direction of entire civilizations. The same psychological mechanisms that make us share memes also make us vote for candidates, support causes, and accept explanations for complex problems. History is littered with societies that collapsed not because they lacked smart people, but because their smart people were silenced by the herd. The Soviet Union had brilliant scientists and thinkers, but they were forced to conform to ideological orthodoxy. Nazi Germany had one of the world's most educated populations, but education became a tool of conformity rather than independent thought. The pattern is always the same. First, independent thinking becomes socially costly, then it becomes professionally dangerous. Finally, it becomes literally impossible as the herd takes complete control of information, education, and social rewards. We're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction. And the speed of modern communication makes the process much faster than it used to be. What happens when the collective wisdom of crowds becomes the collective madness of mobs? What happens when the democratization of information becomes the democratization of delusion? These aren't abstract philosophical questions anymore. They're urgent, practical problems that will determine the future of human civilization. Resistance is still possible, but it requires something Nietzsche called intellectual courage, the willingness to think thoughts that might isolate you from the crowd. First, you must learn to recognize the physiological signs of herd thinking in yourself. When you feel that rush of righteousness that comes from sharing something that destroys your enemies, pause. When you feel the warm glow of belonging that comes from liking what everyone else likes, question it. When you feel the satisfying click of certainty about complex issues, doubt it. These feelings aren't guides to truth, they're warnings that your herd instincts have been activated. Second, develop what we might call cognitive resistance training. Deliberately seek out ideas that make you uncomfortable, not because they're necessarily true, but because discomfort is often a sign that you're breaking out of your intellectual comfort zone. Force yourself to engage with the strongest versions of arguments you disagree with. Third, practice the art of saying, "I don't know." In a world that rewards quick opinions over careful thought, admitting uncertainty has become a radical act. Most viral ideas succeed because they offer false certainty about complex issues. The antidote is to become comfortable with genuine uncertainty, to prefer honest confusion over confident delusion. Finally, accept the social cost of intellectual independence. Nietzsche was brutally honest about this. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. This struggle never ends. There will always be pressure to conform, to simplify, to go along with the crowd. The herd offers immediate rewards: belonging, certainty, the satisfaction of being right along with everyone else. Independent thought offers something different: the possibility of genuine understanding, even if it comes with loneliness and doubt. Here's the uncomfortable truth, one Nietzsche would instantly recognize. We're not just surrounded by dumb ideas. We're actively creating a world where smart ideas can't survive. Every time we reward what's viral over what's valuable, we train our collective mind to crave intellectual junk food. Every time we flatten complexity into cheap simplicity, we build a culture that can't handle nuance. Every time we choose comforting agreement over challenging contradiction, we dig deeper into what Nietzsche called the grave of the spirit. The real danger isn't just that individuals believe foolish things, it's that our entire information ecosystem is evolving to produce and reward foolishness. Algorithms amplify our worst impulses and mute our best. Think about what this means for the next generation. Children aren't just bumping into bad ideas here and there. They're growing up inside systems that systematically rewire their minds, exploiting the very weaknesses Nietzsche warned us about. He put it starkly, what does not kill me makes me stronger. But he also hinted at the flip side, what makes us comfortable makes us weak. And we've built a world designed to keep us as comfortable as possible. The result? A kind of intellectual diabetes. We've gorged on so much mental sugar, we've lost the ability to process real nutrition. Many can't tell profound insight from clever-sounding nonsense. And this isn't just about individual choices anymore. Structural forces now shape how ideas spread, and they increasingly work against the deep, difficult thinking human flourishing needs. We're not merely choosing dumb ideas. We're becoming the kind of creatures who can't help but choose them. Still, even now, there's a choice. The herd promises comfort, belonging, and the sweet reassurance of being right alongside everyone else. But Nietzsche offered something far rarer. The herd gives you comfort, freedom of thought gives you meaning. You can stay safe in the herd, or you can embrace the loneliness and struggle of thinking for yourself. Because in a world where dumb ideas go viral, precisely because they're dumb, the most radical act might simply be to think clearly. In a culture that rewards conformity, the greatest rebellion might be to question what everyone else accepts. The herd will always be there to welcome you back. But once you've tasted true independent thought, once you've felt the meaning that comes from thinking for yourself, you'll understand why Nietzsche believed it was worth any price. So ask yourself, can you afford to think independently? Or more importantly, can you afford not to? Because in the end, the dumbest idea of all is believing someone else can do your thinking for you. And if you know someone who believes every conspiracy that pops up in their feed, or someone who swallows every trending opinion without a second thought, maybe share this with them. Not to prove you're smarter, but because we all need reminders. In an age where going along with the herd is the easiest thing in the world, the real revolution might simply be thinking for yourself.
Lenny was maybe the smartest guy I ever met, yet one of the worst clients that I ever had to coach. He went to Harvard, MIT, worked for a big prestigious Wall Street bank. He had enough degrees to paper an entire wall and a half, but when it came to texting a girl that he liked, he froze. He'd run complex simulations in his head, attempt to explain to me the game theory of using a
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. The play No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre opens with 3 characters sitting in a rather plain room. We have a journalist who fled the war and was accused of cowardice, a quite manipulative lesbian sadist, and a flirtatious gold digger. Now, the 3 don't initially know that they're dead, but within a few moments of irritating one another, they come to realise that they're in hell, and each person is the torturer to the other 2. It is from this play that we get the famed but quite misunderstood quote, "Hell is other people." Now, contrary to the setup of the play, the quote doesn't relate to the irritation of other people's existence, but rather the torturous reality of being perceived through the eyes of others. You see, in death, each character is frozen in a narrative. They're unable to amend or adjust how others perceive them, unlike in life, where you can amend your ways in hopes of altering how people will interpret you. This unalterable entombment of perception that others have of us is the hell that Sartre speaks of. But unfortunately, it's not an experience confined to death. See, one of the ways that we form a perception of who we are is through perceptions others have of us, and the louder and more vocal people are about their perceptions and judgments, the more readily we absorb those perceptions about ourselves. Hell, for Sartre, is when we only see ourselves through the eyes of those who hate us, judge us, and perceive us, which explains the torture of lifelong low self-esteem etched into the minds of those who experienced verbal and mental abuse in life, whether that was from parents, classmates, partners, or colleagues at work. You see, in life, we will be entombed by the perception of others, and whether that's from a relative who may always see you through the same eyes they saw you with when you behaved as a naughty child or teenager, or the ex who will never not see you as a cheater who wasted years of her life even if you've only ever been loyal since to your new partner, or the parent who still sees you as a deadbeat and disappointment even if you've gotten a job, earned loads of money and overcame all of your demons decades ago. And I think, honestly, Sartre would have had a field day with the internet and social media, because to me, people online and on social media are even more entombed by external perceptions, just as the three damned souls in Sartre's play. Judgments and perceptions, no matter how inaccurate they are, or even how atoned for they may have been, are near impossible to alter once they have been established online, leading to huge swathes of people who effectively act as judges and jurors, or metaphorical torturers as they would be in Sartre's play, attaching themselves to perceptions about other people, whether that be celebrities, television personalities, politicians, content creators, authors, or journalists, etc. Naturally, also, we live in an age where the effectiveness of social movements such as boycotting, protesting, and cancel culture are contentious, to say the least. But the long-term torture of never being able to escape the perceptions others have of them, whether that's from a response one received to a mortifying tweet from 10 years ago, or a controversial and unkind act, that is a form of judgment that very, very few can ever escape. You see, when we say hell is other people, it is not about misanthropy, but about the overwhelming torture of only experiencing your existence through someone else's mind. Now, this concept may also sound quite familiar for anyone in the psychology field, because we have a concept there called the looking glass self, which was coined by American sociologist Charles Horton Cooley, who wrote, quote, "As we see our face, figure and dress in the glass, and we are interested in them because they are ours, and pleased or otherwise with them according as they do or do not answer to what we should like them to be, so in the imagination we perceive another's mind, some thought of our appearance, manners, aims, deeds, character, friends, and so on, and are variously affected by it. The looking glass self has often been summarised as, I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am." But before I go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. So whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to time to courses, all in one place and all on your terms. I've gone through many iterations of my time on the internet, starting off as a book blogger and now running my own business, and Squarespace has actually seen all of these stages of my career. I can create workshops on my Squarespace website, so I can sell courses and I can host those on my website, which allows for members only content, so I can build a community over there, and I can sell online access to things like courses, blogs, or videos, or memberships, and purchases can be anything from a single one-time fee to a subscription service. And then when it comes to evolving my business, I can make smarter business decisions with Squarespace's intuitive built-in analytics tools, which lets me review my website traffic, learn where to focus my engagement, and track revenue from bookings, invoices, and product sales at .com. It's not actually unique to people with high profiles. Many people will rehearse conversations that they have in their heads, whether with a shop assistant, a friend, a partner they're about to break up with, etc. Also, there are millions of people who overthink what they will post on social media or text someone. Or there are people who come home feeling emotionally and physically exhausted after being around people for long stretches of time due to the energy expenditure of their perpetual internal surveillance of everything that comes out of their mouths. Being hyper aware of external judgments, perceptions, and interpretations is so exhausting and horrifying because it is a form of living in which one feels as though they do not have any control over who they are anymore. Because technically, they don't. Because they have decided, usually unconsciously, that the reality of who they are is intrinsically tied to the perceptions other people have of them rather than perceptions they have of themselves. So when other people reduce you to a sentiment, a period of time in your life, a mistake, an error of judgment, a fault, an opinion, or a flaw, you become tortured by the reality that others only know you for one thing, and you don't have the ability to change that, because you cannot physically alter how their minds work. Then you have those who fear the perception others hold of them according to laws and social hierarchies. In his book, Frantz Fanon examines the effects racism has on the psyche. You see, Fanon discusses in depth the double consciousness and how colonized people become hyper-aware of how they are perceived by the dominant white culture, and explores the psychological impacts of feeling isolated from oneself as a colonized individual, and the internalized oppression of being defined by others and society rather than oneself. Similarly, in her text The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir discusses how women are raised to see themselves through the eyes of others, especially men, resulting in constant self-monitoring, self-doubt, and a painful self-awareness of their bodies as objects of desire and vehicles for sexual reproduction. Now, despite the very varied issues between these philosophers, the idea that our self-construct is one which is formulated via interpreting and accepting external perceptions of ourselves by others is pretty consistent. Thus, it's pretty understandable that when faced with this reality, people feel hopeless and powerless. When one defines oneself by external perceptions, anyone in this world has the power to reduce an individual to absolutely nothing. And naturally, this colossal power other people have over one another makes many people terrified, and the fear of being perceived forces them to hide away. It makes them want to completely disappear, delete everything, become a hermit, and never interact with anyone ever again. I mean, after all, why try and exist when we have no control of how we will be perceived? If we don't like ourselves because our perception of ourselves is entirely defined by the negative perceptions of other people, then why would we want to live with ourselves anymore? Or why would we want to risk socializing with people when we can make a single mistake and forever be defined by those markers, which we more often than not have no control over afterwards, because people's minds are too fixed to think differently? Now, obviously, this actually technically isn't all negative. The need for external perceptions of ourselves and our awareness of the self being perceived by others is why a lot of us keep to the rules or perform a certain way. In his Being a Nothing, Sartre uses an example, I believe, of him peeking through a keyhole, and he imagines then someone walking in and seeing him peeking through a keyhole and having that horrifying moment of seeing himself via another person. A lot of us don't do things for fear of being seen by other people, and that's actually a good thing. When you're a child, you stopped picking your nose and eating it when you realise that your classmates are looking at you and defining you as the nose picker and eater. That extends itself to many other habits in life, whether that's behaving politely on a train or not taking your shoes off in public places, etc. So the idea that we do question our reality and perform a certain way based on how others would perceive us were we to act that way is a way of morally applying ourselves in a way that fits with society. but then it can become all-consuming when it becomes a paranoia. And I think the internet and social media has made that a far deeper fear for many more people. Though some people unfortunately skirt around that moral dilemma by being anonymous people on the internet and trolling people, but were they to be exposed, I doubt they would perform that same way. But if our self is being crippled and we are miserable, living in an eternal hell of how much we hate ourselves based on how other people perceive us, and that perception effectively working like a virus in our brains, making it painful to exist, what's the solution? Do we accept our hellish experience? Or do we adopt some kind of egocentric, dismissive personality and reject all external opinions and just accept that we can't change that, but it doesn't matter? Technically, I don't have an answer. And when I was reading about this and reading around it, I couldn't really see anyone responding to it. I would have to read more into shame, in all honesty. There is a book on the philosophy of shame, which I have got on my reading list ready to explore to see if it comes with a solution to this. But right now, whilst discussing the topic, I couldn't come up with a solution. Obviously, there is no solution, no exit, because that's the point. They are dead, they cannot change it, and that's why they're hellish experience. But I believe in and captured in time and forever experienced that way.